Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. World of Warcraft is crammed full of mysteries, riddles, and cryptic messages that supposedly tell us what the future holds. And well, none of them really suggest a bright future. Today, we are going to go over every single one of these things that matters and comprehensively break them all down. With the next expansion announcement looming, BlizzCon's only like 3 weeks away, now is the perfect time to get caught up on all of this stuff so you can enjoy what goes down at the con. So, if you are already on board with the lore, hopefully you'll gain some new perspectives on it in this video, and if you're not, then this video will take you through all that you need to know. Let's kick it off with the Old Gods. Given the presence of xal'atath, Il'gynoth, and a few other sources, there are loads of riddles to decipher regarding the Old Gods. Azeroth has 4 Old Gods. There were originally 5, but it has been suggested that one of them was devoured by the others early on. Now, Y'Shaarj was fully killed, and the other 3, Yogg-Saron, C'Thun, and N'Zoth, were imprisoned. As xal'atath tells us, N'Zoth was the weakest of them, but that his true strength lied in the ability to corrupt and to manipulate. Players of course beat back C'Thun and Yogg-Saron and Vanilla and Wrath, and well, the return of N'Zoth has been hinted at ever since, especially in the Cataclysm expansion. N'Zoth was imprisoned by the Titans long ago, and he's yet to emerge, unlike the other 2. But we do know that his prison is weakening.
But the rift is deep and vast, and somewhere down there it stirs. Something has changed. The last prison weakens. We must prepare. It appears the prison of N'Zoth is not as strong as it once was.
But of course that begs the question, where is his prison? There's a few different suggested locations, but I'm quite sure that it's near the Maelstrom, and I think there's a decent amount of evidence to support this. So let's get into it.
To find him, drown yourself in the circle of stars.
So where is this circle of stars? Well, many thought that it was connected to the Nightborn's fascination with astrology, but there is actually a literal circle of stars in the game. If you travel to Deepholm and you just look up, you'll see them. Furthermore, that same circle of stars can be seen in the Shaman Order Hall. Now, the usage of the same skybox 6 years later seems to be a very deliberate thing to me. Now, as we move onwards to the Legion stuff, there are some hints. First, it's worth noting that the Temple of Elune, or as we now know it, the Tomb of Sargeras, used to be something very different, long before the Titans even arrived on Azeroth. This is what xal'atath has to say about the area.
This was always a place of power. Egwene was drawn here, and before her, the elves. And before them, the trolls. And before them...
As you can see, its history goes back way further than we can, well, possibly know, I suppose, before the ordering of the planet. I had seen some rumours of an old god being imprisoned beneath Thraldranath, but that seems unlikely given how this was a place of old god power long before the Titans imprisoned anyone. And this makes the following extremely, extremely significant in my mind. So, we are told this.
5 keys to open our way. 5 torches to light our path.
Okay, 5 keys. There are 5 pillars of creation. As for the torches, well, the pedestals I think do actually glow when they're used, but what for me solidifies the relevance of this is the following line.
The Lord of Ravens will turn the key.
Who is this Lord of Ravens? Well, it would seem to be Khadgar. As the wielder of Atish, she uses the Raven form that Medivh was quite well known for. But here's the bit that matters. Who activates the Pillar of Creations in the Tomb of Sargeras? Yeah, it's Khadgar. He's the one who uses them. He turns the key. So, there's a line here which refers to the Pillars of Creation as the keys, and another line which tells us that the Lord of Ravens turns the key, which makes this Khadgar parallel very, very clear. Now, Lord Ravencrest does of course pop up as a potential candidate, but he doesn't really do anything in Legion. And then also we're told this.
The King of Diamonds has been made a pawn.
The King of Diamonds. Well, that's clearly Magni Bronzebeard. Now this is the unsettling bit. Magni is the one who led us to the Pillars of Creation. If not for him, we would have really no idea. This suggests that he is aiding the Old Gods, albeit unknowingly. Remember that the Old Gods, they do not want the Legion to fully succeed. The most that they want the Legion to do is be an effective distraction. Sargeras destroying Azeroth's Titan denies the old gods of the chance to corrupt it, which goes against their ultimate goal completely. They want to corrupt it so they can't have the Legion win. In that sense, we have all been made pawns. But in what sense is Magni a pawn? Well, it's worth remembering that to someone who is aligned towards the old gods, him helping Azeroth, that is akin to being a pawn, in the same way that we would see someone serving an old god as being a pawn. It's possible that this line is just based on the perspective of xal'atath, who's the person who actually says it. Before we break this down though, one more line.
At the hour of her third death, she ushers in our coming.
So at the time, most people took this line to be a metaphoric look at Jaina, or saying that Sylvanas is a bit of a ticking time bomb given how she's already died and been brought back before. But here's the thing, Sylvanas has already died 3 times, once to Arthas, once by suicide, and most recently by Lord Godfrey, which rules her out of this. Some have attempted to make this work for Azeroth, or some had, but at the time they could only find 2 metaphorical deaths, the Sundering and the Shattering. Well, the end of patch 7.3 has Sargeras stabbed the planet, which could be the 3rd death. Now, he doesn't just stab the planet anywhere, no, he stabs it in xal'atath. Now, one player managed to get out of bounds when doing the Heart of Azeroth scenario that led into 7.3, and they found that that area, technically, was located in xal'atath. Now, this isn't canon because it was just, sort of explored in-game in a way that you sort of really shouldn't, but why would they construct the maps like that? It seems very strange and overall just a very interesting coincidence, and that stabbing could be taken as her 3rd death. But how would it usher in the coming of old gods? Well, as we saw, her heart area in the scenario was full of void god forces, so that was a bit worrying. We had to cut through them to reach Magni. Now, this final wound could weaken her so much that N'Zoth has an opportunity, either to corrupt her, to sap her power, or to just break out of his prison at an opportune moment. Another possibility is that the 3rd death refers to Elisande. We defeat her 3 times to get the final Pillar of Creation, which of course is one of the 5 keys that we mentioned earlier. And then there is one other line that comes to mind.
Her heart is a crater, and we have filled it.
So you could take this to reference the massive crater in xal'atath after 7.3, but we have to remember that this line predates Sargeras stabbing the planet, so I don't really think that works. That said, soon after this, we did venture to the Heart of Azeroth, and when we were there, we indeed saw, yep, it's packed full of void stuff. Much like with the last line that we considered, this one was also rumored to be about Sylvanas or Jaina, given how both of them are severely emotionally damaged. Sylvanas has a relationship that's with her sister that's pretty messed up. She lost much of her purpose when Arthas was defeated, and now she's terrified of what awaits her in death, even though the visions of death that she saw when she committed suicide could actually be because of Yogg-Saron, because technically her body did land on Saronite. As for Jaina, well, there's so many things. City nuked, one of her great friends dead, let her father die, all that stuff. Now, I think it also could be possible that when both of these lines say her, they could be referring to different people. So, one line could be talking about Azeroth, the other one could be talking about Jaina and Sylvanas. But one thing that I do think would be unfortunate is if either of those characters got turned into a sort of a generic puppet character. But before we move on, what I want to draw from all of this is the fact that it's been established that an area of great old god power in the past is where Khadgar activated the Pillars of Creation. So while the Pillars of Creation were able to help us out with the Legion, we don't really know what else happened. Those Pillars of Creation, of course, they are of Titan origins, but again, who really knows how they were used? When the Nightborn used them to seal that tomb in, was there some sort of old god machination or, tomfoolery? It's hard to say, but the fact that all of these lines suggest that areas of extreme power to the old gods and historically is super important, and that's exactly where we apparently, usher in their coming with these 5 keys, the Pillars of Creation. I think that just can't be overlooked. Of course, there are a few other lines like this one.
The boy king serves at the master's table. 3 lives will he offer you.
So the Boy King, well, that's almost definitely Anduin Wrynn. The Blizzard writers even had Gul'dan refer to Anduin as Boy King, so I think that's pretty clear. Some have suggested that it could be Wrathion, and while he certainly isn't young, he isn't a king, although he sort of self-titled himself Black Prince. Wrathion serving N'Zoth, though, would be a bit strange from a narrative perspective. I don't think it would be particularly interesting having him go the same way as Deathwing. I think that would just be boring. As for Anduin, well, we just don't know. I think this is something that would come up in a future expansion, and that the sort of, they're sowing the seeds of it now, perhaps an expansion that's more focused on the Alliance and the Horde and less focused on our class order halls and their doing, which really does sound like what the next expansion could be. Okay, the wound in Azeroth. Let's talk a little bit about that, because it's super important. First, we can see that it is spilling our Titan's lifeblood out everywhere, and according to Khadgar,
if the blood of Azeroth also proves to be a source of such strength, those who seek to rule this world will stop at nothing to possess it. The days ahead may be dark indeed.
Those who seek to rule our world. I think there's a few ways to take that line. The first is looking directly at the Alliance and the Horde in a more conventional sense. With the widely known threat defeated with the Legion, and the old god thing being, a bit less imminent in the threat of normal citizens, well, we could see a scramble for power. While Anduin is the leader of the Alliance, it's fair to say that Genn holds a lot of sway over him because he's been acting sort of as his mentor and friend through these recent times. As for Jaina, well, both Jaina and Anduin have had a strong friendship, which means that Anduin's key advisors are overtly pro-war, anti-Horde. Just look at how Genn was trying to rush into battle in Stormheim. Look at how Jaina pretty much attempted to start an open war near the start of the expansion before she teleported away, never to be seen again. As for Sylvanas, well, she sees power as a form of security. Her ultimate goal is to not end up dead, so it's pretty clear that she would be interested in the blood of a Titan. It's hard to say what will happen to her, though, because unfortunately her Legion story just seems to have been cut. Now, the second reading of what Khadgar said is that the old gods would seek out power, using it to, gain energy, take full form, do whatever they might do. After all, Titan blood is seeping through the sands near Syl'atath, no doubt into many of the underground tunnels of the Kharaj Empire, which of course is right where Cthulhu is. Maybe we'll see him come back. Personally, I see both of those things as being likely, with the old gods wanting to use our divisions, emphasized by the rush for this new resource that everyone wants to get a leg up over their supposed enemy, so that the old gods can just strike us when we're weak. And speaking of us being weak and weird foreshadowing, let's talk about Varamathras. In the Antor's raid, we come across a tortured Varamathras. He taunts us about our place in the world with Alliance and Horde-specific dialogue that's super relevant, so this is what he tells Alliance players.
So, your Alliance still endures. Longer than I expected, though she has already planted the seeds of its downfall. She is patient, that one. When your thrones run red with betrayal, when your holy places burn, and the shattered mask hangs above your hearth, only then will you know, and it will be too late.
So the most important thing is the shattered mask. That is the mark of the Forsaken, but do note that Sylvanas cannot betray the Alliance because she's the enemy of the Alliance. So who could this betrayer be? Well, Jane is disillusioned, so perhaps she could plot a coup. I doubt that Ilaria would go and mess us up, so I don't think she could be involved. So yeah, it really seems like Jaina, potentially, but let's go and take a look at what he says to the Horde players.
Tell me, when she seized your throne of hides and bones, was your allegiance forced? No, I'd wager you surrendered it willingly, or were convinced you did.
This is a very interesting line because it is, suggesting that the bizarre decision to make Sylvanas the War Chief is not all that it seems. Impersonating a Loa to a dying troll seems like a very old god-ish thing to do, though I must admit I think it would be a bad end to the character of Vol'jin. I think it's also possible that a Valkyr could do those whispers as well on Sylvanas' behalf if she wanted to seize power, and, her acting maybe was just good in those cinematics, I suppose. And then Varmathras ends both conversations with saying that we're blind to the darkness around us, which is, of course, referring to the Void. And speaking of the Void, it's time for the Locust Walker, a strange character. Illyria's mentor in all things Void, they've had quite a past. He has helped her get out of slippery situations, and more recently, he's aided her and the player on Argus. But he's still a really mysterious character, with xal'atath commending his desire for power, but thinking that his arrogance will be his undoing. As for Illyria, well, her embrace of the Void certainly seems very interesting, though it does very much seem like she's using it as a tool in a healthy way, I guess. But still, xal'atath says this.
The caterpillar has become the butterfly. She is all but ours now.
That last line is the important one. Could it be that while, yeah, sure, she can use the Void to her benefit, that could sow the seeds of something that a supreme Void being like an old god could pretty much just snatch up to sort of, take away her mind. Basically, in taking on this power, she could make herself a bit weaker to the persuasions of the Void, maybe in a similar way to how someone who is very light-aligned could be blinded by the light. And while I've brought up Illyria, it's worth mentioning that some have thought that Arator is the actual Child of Shadow and Light. I don't think this is the case, because that whole Child of Shadow and Light thing is a prophecy of Xera's creation, and as with most prophecies, they're designed to be self-fulfilling. The act of making the prophecy pretty much helps to make it come true. But with the death of Xera and Illidan saying, nope, the prophecy's dead. Unless Blizzard somehow forget this and continue on, but I really do think that prophecy's kind of dead. Much has also been said just about Shadow and Light in general, and it's worth pointing out that recently in an interview, one of the Blizz developers said that Light and Void are not necessarily purely good and evil, they're more just sort of primal forces, and that Xera is an example of the Light being, sort of doing what she felt was right, though not doing something that would be judged as being good. Remember, the Scarlet Crusade were able to, wield the light, and they were certainly not good guys. I think this is actually great, making it less black and white, because it increases the possibility space of future stories. It gives them more wiggle room, and I think that could be way better. I also have to talk about the Kul Tiras leak. For a time, items appeared in the PTR that referenced Kul Tiras questing gear. Now, being an island nation, it of course fits perfectly into N'Zoth and Naga elements, and it's also Jaina's homeland. Of course, given, Jaina's big presence in the BlizzCon key art, it's very likely that she's going to be involved. Now, I mentioned the idea of a coup before, but we could just end up being straight up an ally with her, or something like that. Of course, Alliance players could ally with her and Kul Tiras. Horde players could maybe get something going with Sylvanas and the Undead if we were just to be buddy-buddy fighting the old gods. The one thing that I do think would be very cool is going there, finding that Jaina's fine, but her nation is sort of corrupted. The idea of a corrupted, sort of driven mad maritime nation, that's completely in line with Lovecraftian mythology, and if they did it right, it would be really awesome. But of course, it's hard to know because Jaina just sort of left. Now finally, there's one bit of older lore with the puzzle box of Yogg-Saron that I want to cover. So the puzzle box mentions Neolotha. I just want to mention that when he died, Il'gynoth said, "I journey to Neolotha." Now, while many people think that Neolotha is actually Nazjatar, the capital of the Naga, I don't think that's true. I think the Neolotha is far more ancient, going way back before the days of the elves even existing, and it's just probably something a lot larger, darker, more, deeply evil than, say, Nazjatar is. So I think that's pretty much it for the various riddles, mysteries, and conspiracy theories that have been cropping up over the last few years, and with Legion especially. While, of course, the impending announcement of Expansion 7 did spur on this recap video, I think that this should be rather timeless because I imagine that some of the lines of dialogue here are hinting at things that are further down the line, maybe in 1 or 2 expansions' time. Overall, though, I love the idea of Blizzard, dropping these little, hints, mysteries, things like that. It spurs on discussion, gets everyone more into the lore, and I think it's a pretty effective way to not necessarily tell a story, but at least to do some very effective world building. But that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm.